Hi guys, I'm James Bruce, you're watching Tabletop Dungeon, and today I want to give you 3 tips for how to win at my favourite game, Carcassonne. Now this is not just one of mine, but it's a family favourite. I have thousands of games of it under my belt, and that's because it's not only a fantastic way to bring new people into hobby, it's a great gateway game, but it can also be absolutely brutal and cutthroat of a game if you want it to be. And today I'm going to give you 3 tips on how to play the more brutal, cutthroat side of Carcassonne. Now I should stress that you absolutely should not use these to stop watching the video if you're using this as a gateway game. The purpose of a gateway game is to bring new people into the hobby and to have fun. And if you play like this, they're probably not going to want to play with you again. But if you've been playing quite a few games now at your table and everyone is comfortable with the basic rules and just wants to level it up a bit, then by all means, bring these tips into your game. So without further ado, let's start. Tip number 1 is farms, farms, farms. So in any game of roughly sort of equal skilled players, ultimately it's probably going to come down to farm points at the end of the game. Farms, of course, are something that you commit your workers to. You can't remove them after you've placed them down. So as well as being both a high risk part of the game, it's a very high reward part of the game. That's where the real points will come from. For that reason, if you don't fully understand how farms work, if you can't immediately look at the board and say, okay, this person owns this area is unclaimed, so's this bit, and I could probably join it on there, then you're going to seriously hinder your chances of winning the game. Now, this isn't a game tip so much, I guess, as something that you really need to learn. And in order to learn it, the quickest way I found was to play on something like Xbox Live or on the iPhone or iPad app. So that's just a really quick way. You can bash out lots and lots of games of that really quickly, and you'll know how farms work perfectly. So more specifically, when it comes to tips around farms, early on in the game, I find that if I come up with a road or something that I don't particularly like building, then I will use that road piece just to try and claim a nice bit of farmland. The best places to claim a farm tend to be around the churches or the cathedrals, whatever you want to call them, because they are by their nature connected to vaster areas of green, which will encompass more castles and score you more points. Now in the latter stages of the game, in the last sort of 5 to 6 turns, you should really only be looking towards claiming farmland. Little patches here and there you'll see that are as yet unclaimed, but might have 6, maybe 9 points. So then at the end of the game, you've got 5 sets of 6, 9 points that other players don't have, and that's going to push you over the edge. In most games, you'll probably find there's one really large area of land which encompasses lots of castles, and that's going to be the one that's fought after most seriously. So all throughout the game, I actually just tend to forget about roads completely. I find they're not worth the effort. Just use those pieces to try and claim and keep hold of that farmland in any way you can. However, there is an exception to this tip. If you find that there is only one massive castle that people are working on, then you should move on to tip 2. Obviously, for farmland, you want to have multiple castles, multiple small castles if you can, really, rather than one massive castle. Tip number 2, let everyone else do the hard work. You don't win at Carcassonne by creating lovely castles. That's for everyone else to do. Instead, what you want to do is to wait for everyone else to build a castle, and once it's got to, say, the 4-5 tile stage, you want to muscle on in there and share their castle, cooperate with them, help them to finish it. Do this compulsively with as many other players as possible, and you will win. Yes, ultimately you're sharing points with them. You're both going to get the same number of points when you complete the castle. But if that's a 20-30 point castle and you're doing this with every player, then you're getting 80, 100 points total, and they're each getting 20 points. Don't bother building your own castles, just build everyone else's. Now, you might be tempted to put 2 people in there, especially if you're playing with, I think it's the Traders and Builders expansion that has the big guy worth 2 points. You might be tempted to put him straight in and claim the whole castle. I really don't suggest you do that. Early on in the game, if you were to do that, it would put off everyone else because they'll know how you play. They'll know that it's a very aggressive play style. You really want to play more of a sort of tit-for-tat approach. That means that you start by cooperating, and if they don't want to cooperate with you, then go ahead and go all thermonuclear on them. So I said you don't want to do this early in the game because it'll put people off cooperating with you. And again, in the later stages of the game, you don't really want to do this either because you'll need each other as much as possible to actually complete that castle and get the points for it. So at all stages of the game, you should aim to be cooperative with as many other players as possible. Don't be too greedy. My third and final tip is don't let them have that castle. If you get to a point in the game where other people, say multiple other players are cooperating on a castle, and it looks ever so much like they're going to finish it without you being able to get in on the action too, then just screw up their castle. Do whatever you can to mess it up so that they can't finish it. Now, it's easier to do this in the latter stages of the game because there are just less pieces to choose from. But even in the earlier stages, if they're at that crucial finishing point when they need one last tile to finish it off, anything that you can place next to that tile will limit their options. There's only ever going to be a certain number of tiles in the bag that will finish something. So the more you can limit those options for them to finish it, the better, the less chances they have of getting it completed. As a practical example, right here you can see that any of these tiles could be used to finish the castle, but it's your turn. What do you do? Well, ideally, you would have joined into this castle earlier and not let it got to this stage, but let's assume that didn't happen. If it's their turn next, consider what happens if I put a curved road here. Well, suddenly that's down to only these pieces that would possibly finish it. It's certainly not impossible to finish. There's nearly always going to be some tiles that they might come across that will finish it and get them the points. But again, it's a game of chance, really, isn't it? You want to reduce the chances they have of finishing it. But again, it's always better to make sure you're in on that castle action in the first place. Don't let it get to that stage. Also, if you're playing with the expansion that has cathedrals inside of castles, which act like a double or nothing piece, if you do finish it, you get double the normal amount of points, and if you don't finish it by the end of the game, you get nothing. Feel free to use those to screw up other people's castles. Don't be afraid to be nasty and use that. Chances are, once you put that piece onto their castle, they're just going to give up entirely and say, well, look, I probably can't finish that, especially in the later stages of the game. In the earlier stages of the game, put that castle piece in there, then add in one of your own people at some point. You'll probably have a lot more chances to do that, and then you can both work together on some glorious big castle with lots of double points. So that's it. That's my 3 pro tips for how to win at Carcassonne. And to be clear, these aren't going to make you any friends. I've seen some people online even call these sort of tactics unsportsmanlike. But in my mind, if you're not playing to win the game with the best of your ability, that in itself is unsportsmanlike. Although, of course, with the obvious caveat, as I mentioned earlier, that you should never use these tactics when you're playing with beginners. By all means, use the opportunity to teach them about farms, but don't play so aggressively that they're going to lose out on any points from farms, because you really want to get them into the game. That's the whole point of a gateway game, right? So only use these tips if you've gone past that point and you're now looking to level up the game a bit. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed these tips and that they help you. They're not all of the strategies by any means. Of course, there's lots of different ways that you can successfully win at Carcassonne. These are just the ones that I use most often. If you have a different set of strategies that works out for you, then let me know about it down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and consider subscribing. I'll admit this isn't the sort of video I normally do. It's usually board game reviews or some sort of terrain tutorial. Anyway, thanks for watching, and until next time.